2 minutes, folks. 2 minutes. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's 4 o'clock. Happy to get started with our reopening task force meeting. Thank you all for being here very, very much. Our agenda today is to go through and hear committee reports about the 3 questions that were posed of the subcommittees. Those 3 questions I'll copy and paste into the chat, but do we preemptively declare a more restrictive status of either orange or red for segment 5 and or 6? Or do we ride the data until we get closer? Meaning, do we wait to see what happens? The second question is, what options or considerations should be given for students who demonstrate academic, social, or emotional gaps as a result of our 2 disrupted school years? Should we consider an option for students to be retained at a school beyond the typical matriculation schedule? And third, what preparations should we make for the 2021 school year from a budget and planning perspective? And so I'd like to go through and hear from each of our subcommittees. I know you all had meetings over the past couple of weeks, which is very appreciated, and I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback. So with that said, Autumn, from our parents, would you be willing to go first? Is that all right with you? All right, Autumn Grdina from our parent subgroup. Take it away, Autumn.
All right. Hi, everybody. I worked with Amy. We set up meetings on Tuesday, or I don't remember, Monday. We had all together, I think we were right at the 20-person mark. We had a morning meeting and an evening meeting. So we were right near 20 people who joined us. And we asked the 3 questions that Adam presented, and I broke out the feedback from the parents in different categories. So positives, concerns, and then other ideas that kind of came up during the conversation of the topics. So the first one being, given the recent staff student parent survey, should we consider more restrictive status? So overwhelmingly, the parents, based on the fact that cases are low and the kids have done a good job, and they're reassured that people are being responsible, the parents feel like we should stay the course. They feel comfortable knowing that the process is working in the schools, and that it was almost across the board, definitely to stay in school during segment 5 and possibly in 6 if the case count allows. That was the main kind of overall feeling that we got from the parents during both of those meetings. The concerns that were brought up with the fact that we may go into either orange or red status during that time frame is there were more concerns than there were. Generally, everybody was just yes, keep on going. So the concerns were if we go remote in some fashion, whether it be hybrid or full red, that the special ed students are going to miss out on getting their IEP needs met. There were specific concerns related to the seniors and how this part of the year is their most busiest to prep for what comes next. So there was specific concern about, even if everybody were to go remote or orange or red, could we make accommodations for the seniors because it's so important to them right now? There was a conversation about the spikes in higher ed cases and how that might affect us, but an understanding that there is a differentiation between that and of course the settings of the schools. There were concerns raised about the inconsistency of schooling when switching from modalities. So at this point, our kids have been in either, for the most part, either in school or out. I don't know the percentage of kids that are going back and forth at this point. I feel like, at least in Mount Vernon, it seems relatively consistent that we don't have a lot of people popping in and out. So there's concern about them getting placed with a teacher that they haven't had or don't know yet if they were to go into an orange or red status, where at this point, because they've been in school for this long or in remote session for this long, they've really kind of formed the relationship. And there's concern of the parents that if the inconsistencies begin, then we might start to lose any progress that we've been able to make up from being out last spring. And then based on how quickly the change is made, there is some concern about being able to prepare the students mentally for what's to come. And certainly everybody understands that, you know, should we have a crazy spike in cases, then we just have to do it for the safety of everybody. But if it were to happen, they would appreciate as much of a lead time as possible, just so that everyone can prepare their students. And then lastly, just the stress on parents and families if the students were back in the home learning environment. So that's what I have for topic 1. I don't know if anybody has any specific questions or if I should just continue on.
Yeah, I think let's handle all of topic 1 first, and then we can, based on what time we have, we can get to the next question, because I have a feeling it's going to take a while to get through all of our reports just on the first question. So any questions of the panelists for Autumn? And Amy, thank you as well, Amy Wyman, for helping out with this as well. I don't see anybody's hand raised, so no questions so far. Thanks, Autumn.
Sure.
Next, if we could hear Stephen O'Keefe and Amy Facey, the Faculty, Staff, and Association subgroup.
Great, thank you, Adam. Amy and I had the pleasure of meeting with our district's experts and professionals to just get their insight and their views on how we should really respond to sort of segment 5 and segment number 6 with regards to our opening plan. And we got a lot of awesome feedback. I'm just going to go ahead and just give you, I'm going to share my screen just so everyone can see the verbatims here. So in terms of the subcommittee work, you can see here that we just want to make sure that there's a plan in place, and more importantly, that we want to make sure that we've given ample enough time to actually, number one, prepare classrooms, but parents also can prepare for childcare needs, significant changes in their life, and just basically making sure that we're not making a spur of the moment decision. Although that's a part of our plan to move to a more restrictive status if the data allows. But since we're talking specifically about after Thanksgiving, we want to just get as much advance time as possible, just to make sure that everyone is properly prepared. One of the cool feedbacks from our Clark Wilkins teammates indicated that, obviously our youngest kids need to actually have an in-person experience as long as possible. So allowing that personal instruction is so vital, not only for their development, but for their comprehension of the subject matters at hand. And so if we are going to go to a more restrictive status, one of our middle school folks said, we want to properly, extremely well define what orange looks like. It's a reduced count inside of our buildings. We want to make sure that our building leadership is coming up with a plan to say that, okay, we're going to actually remove X, Y, Z percentage kids. We're going to go partial days, or whatever that actually looks like, that we go ahead and we actually communicate and over communicate what that actually looks like. We also got feedback about significant numbers of our staff indicating that they want to travel and leave the particular area, which would then require them to go ahead and satisfy the 14-day quarantine period. So, Mr. Superintendent, we want to make sure that you're properly aware of that piece, because if that's going to be the case, we're going to have some significant staffing issues within inside of our buildings. Next comment down is just really reflective of the fact that we want to make sure that we if we do stay open, that we significantly reduce the capacity of our buildings with a max capacity of roughly about 25% at any given time, unless there's a case that needs to dictate we go to more restrictive or to red where everybody goes remote. So at this point, one of the feedback points that Amy and I both received is orange is definitely more on the advised side, but a well-defined, well-structured, and a well-thought-out orange, and over communication about what that actually physically looks like. Some of the other comments that are on there, we can go ahead and forward it to you, but that's a good chunk of what Amy and I had received for feedback. Amy, do you want to add anything there?
Sorry, no, I think you covered it.
Awesome.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you, Amy and Stephen. Georgia Craven, would you like to report on the students where they're at with this?
Yeah, so hi guys, I'm sorry I couldn't make the last meeting. We had a field hockey practice. We had to find a playoff game the day after. But this is gonna come as a bit of a surprise to everyone, but actually in all the conversations Delaney and I had, the high schoolers were not, they didn't take it terribly when we said that this could be a possibility, that we would shut down for segment 5 and 6 and go remote. I think actually I had some positive feedback. A lot of people being like, honestly, yeah, that wouldn't be too bad to do school in those. I feel like it gets really cold and no one likes to get out of bed during that time anyway. So a lot of kids were like, oh, that's not too bad. But no, really what we heard a ton of was that kids are okay with going to like an orange state, maybe not absolutely shutting down, but still having those opportunities to do like labs or meetings one-on-one with teachers if kids aren't going away. And we also talked about possibly doing like little study groups, opening up the school for little small group things for those kids who aren't going to be going away and are just going to be stuck at home the whole time, just so people can have those small group interactions and still have some in-person stuff, because we know it was really hard for everybody in the spring. And then we also talked about how this is a great time to implement a high school mentoring program for the younger kids, some type of Zoom thing. I know I nanny, so if we do go online, like I'll go and do my work while they're doing theirs, so their parents can still go to work. So those kind of things, just figuring that out, especially when we're not closing because there's a ton of cases, but we're closing just to prevent bringing a ton of cases back. So maybe still trying to do some little in-person things, but really from the high school standpoint, people weren't very upset with that. They were like, you know, it's okay as long as this is a way to assure that we'll be able to do more in-person schooling later on in the year. And so I think that's what's important to people. And just to address Autumn's point about the seniors, I am a senior, if you don't know that. And honestly, the college process stuff, I've done all of it with my counselor online already. So don't worry too much. I know a lot of kids are doing like Zoom calls and stuff, and our teachers are helping out a lot. So it would be nice to get some in-person stuff for that, but a lot of kids have already applied to schools and have gotten that initial guidance that we needed. I think that every advisory has been spoken to by the guidance program. So don't make that be the first priority, because we are getting lots of guidance already. And I know that that the staff at our school is so great with being in contact with everybody and helping out. So don't worry too much about the seniors. We can handle it, but it would be nice to get some in-person stuff. But I think really right now it's a good time to worry about the younger kids, because they really need that. And we've acclimated to being online, and lots of our classes in school are online anyway. So I think the high schoolers, we're at that point where we can adapt. It's okay, as long as we can try our best to get back in school in person in the spring. So I think our focus should be on the younger kiddos as much as possible.
Awesome. Thank you, Georgia. And thank you for all the students that you spoke to as well. And no problem missing last time for your field hockey game. Social workers, Sheelu, do you have a report from the folks that work with our students on the social work side of things?
I do, thanks. So I met with some social workers and a couple of school psychologists from across the district to talk through what folks are seeing. I think Georgia said it well. There are, for different schools, we're going to see different things. And we certainly, at the high school where I'm at, I'm seeing some kids really acclimating to how the changes are happening, and there's much more independence for them to go home and get online and things like that. But really thinking hard about some of the younger kids and what they're going through. I think from a social emotional standpoint, we also were thinking a lot about the teachers and what folks are bringing in as well. So overall, I would say we thought that potentially going out for red status wouldn't be the worst. So that was before we heard the great news about being able to have the whole week off for Thanksgiving. So I think that does give people a bit of a breather. And then in between Thanksgiving and Christmas is a couple of weeks. We certainly are finding that a lot of the adults are feeling pretty tapped in terms of really being present for students at all times. In the younger grades, I did hear that there were a lot of teachers who didn't really have any planning time outside of their classrooms. So even if their kids were engaging in lunch or recess or something like that, because of the way things have been set up in pods, some teachers are still responsible for the kids during those times. So there's been some things like that. And then we also talked about, really if we gave some consistency and early information to parents, it would allow for them to make some plans if we went orange or if we needed to go red. We're most concerned with the students who struggled with remote. Those are our tier 3 kids, our tier 2 and tier 3 kids who need a lot more support. So we would want to know, we were thinking it might be best in terms of students, teachers, and community if we knew a little bit ahead of time so that we can make some more proactive plans specifically for those students who needed the extra. So that's kind of where we were at with segment 5. Segment 6, I think we also felt similarly. We would think red, given people's traveling. A lot of our folks are needing to see their family. And I think that there are a lot of people who are hesitant to come out and say, yep, I absolutely am going to go because our dedication is to school. And so we're trying to be in school. And so giving some information ahead of time, I think would allow for people to plan thoughtfully in terms of their families.
Thank you for that, Sheelu. Appreciate that a lot. So the next group is a science and medical group, which has all of our school nurses in it. Jim Manning can't be here today. He's got a personal affair to attend to with someone in his circle who's passed away over the last couple of days, and so he can't be here today. But that group met on a number of occasions, and I actually joined them for a meeting on Monday, and so I can give the highlights of their opinion on this issue, and Deanna is here to make sure that she can correct me if I say something that that's wrong. So their group had lengthy discussions, and by a 7-4 vote initially, they recommended that we preemptively close in December and January for segments 5 and 6. They've had further conversation, and I shared with them some of what the administrative team is thinking, which I'll share next as part of the administrators subgroup report, which I think made that medical subcommittee feel more comfortable. Their so I think they're feeling a couple of things. So the nurses who are really our frontline in all of this, and who are being very much overextended in some ways in dealing with this crisis, they are hearing from the faculty and the level of stress and concern that exists amongst our faculty, and our and just know all of the other things associated with December and January that make them cautious about school being open. There were others on the Science and Medical Subcommittee who felt as if our plan is working very well, meaning we are not, we don't seem to have cases that exist in our schools. We don't seem to have any transmission that's occurred that we're aware of in our schools. When asked the question, is it because we have a good plan or because we're lucky? It's probably a little bit of both, is that in my estimation. And so there are some on that subcommittee who feel strongly we should keep going until there's a reason to not keep going, and others who feel strongly that we need to be proactive. They wrestled with the question, how do we predict that there's going to be a problem? And so it's really the classic question of, do you do something in advance on a preventative measure, or once you start to see a real issue and act quickly to react to it? And so that's really the fundamental question is, are we proactive or reactive in this process? Deanna, what am I missing?
The nurses, school nurses really voiced concern of fatigue, emotionally and physically, for all the staff and nurses and parents. And it's trying on everybody, and everyone's going to have some emotional bursts, which we understand. So we're trying to support people with that. One of our concerns as the nurses, like Adam said, is we don't mind working, but we're getting calls 24/7, different times from different people. What do I do? What do I do? For staff, for students, for parents. And it's okay for a while, but it's starting to grate a little bit that it's continual contact. And one thing we decided we really need to review is the use of PPE, how it's being used, when it should be used, where the supply is, how to access it, to help with social distancing, just the basic rules or procedure ideas to follow, sticking to your cohorts or your pods, really pushing more of that in education all around for parents and staff. We figured that would help some too. And the main concern we had before, in talking with Adam, we were voicing with the holidays coming up and travel, with quarantining needed, if we're not closed at some point or doing something to adjust how we're working, people aren't going to be honest about their traveling. They're going to come to school and could potentially infect us. So the rate's not super high in our community. Hillsborough County is in a substantial, considered to be substantial right now. So that is a concern, is that we really want to be proactive instead of waiting till, we have so many cases in the school, okay, shut down. We want to make sure we're ready. Staff has a chance to get the education or the prep work to go remote that they need before they're actually needed to do that. So that's basically.
Thanks, Deanna. And then our administrators subgroup, which I met with them as well on a couple of occasions. They have a recommendation, and then I'm going to talk through a little bit more of our thinking after having met. I had the advantage of checking in with a lot of you as subcommittee chairs during the past 2 weeks, so I'm not hearing a lot of this for the first time, and so that's given us a little bit of a head start to be ready to bring a draft of a solution forward after hearing some of the previews of what folks are going to share. But first, I'll let the admin team share their recommendations about December and January. Anna?
Thanks, Adam. So we have met on multiple occasions to talk about this also. And
Anna, it might just be me, but you're very quiet. Is you quiet for anybody else?
I'm very soft-spoken individual, Adam.
That's what it is, Anna. I know. You really have to project,
I
Anna.
have somebody cutting grass and my headsets won't work. So I will try to talk louder. So we've met on several occasions, and we echo a lot of the things that have been said. I think the things that we've had in place have been effective, and the teachers and the students are just doing just a remarkable job. It is our hope to be able to stay in school as much as possible as we can, to stay in our yellow for as long as possible. So it is our hope for after November. So Thanksgiving, it would be great to be able to stay in person. To Christmas, I think that we feel, strongly that we would be able to do that. I think with some of the feedback that we are getting based on numbers, if we, are able to stay in school as long as possible.
So Anna, can I add
You can.
that it from a purely educational standpoint, to keep the teaching and learning cycle consistent for students,
Yeah.
to keep the routines consistent, the teaching and learning cycles for staff and students, that's where our recommendation is coming from. But we also talked about that could change from an administrative perspective if the science and medical team and they were made different recommendations, or the evidence and the cases kind of arose. So we weren't absolutely married that, hey, this has to happen. But from a teaching and learning standpoint, we definitely thought based on the information that we had. And we thought, trying to stay the same would be keeping it consistent for students, families, and staff. But we weren't, saying, hey, stay the course above all, safety concerns.
All right, thank you for that, admin team. So I'll share a little bit of some process things that have happened, and I know many people are really envious of the job I have this year. I hear all the time, I wish I had your job, Adam. Kind of like, that's not something I hear very much right now, but I have the unique perspective where I hear from a lot of people, and this issue is pretty perfectly polarizing, meaning there are very strong feelings on one side or the other, and there's not a lot of people who feel ambivalent about what we ought to do. And so what I expected to have come from today's meeting was that the parents would say, please don't close school for the most part, that students would say, we really want school to remain open. And I take George's comments to heart that we're okay if it closes for a while, as long as that means it opens back up, meaning students feel strongly about school remaining open. I knew that I suspected that our faculty and staff would have some concerns about what it means to stay open, and the wear and tear and the fatigue and the challenge and the concerns about travel. So I had a sense that would be coming, and that the science and medical group would also have some unique insights into what has happened over the past few months, and then their opinion about being proactive or reactive to the situation. Hearing from the social and emotional, our social worker group was helpful to get a sense of how folks are feeling and faring with the uniqueness of this school year. And so hearing all of that, I think my job is to try to find something that works for the most people, that's in the best interest of kids and keeps everybody safe. So not an easy thing to do. And so what we as the admin team are thinking, and then we want to give more insight into what that might look like. But what we're thinking is that we make two steps or take two actions to be proactive. One is that the 2 weeks in January between the winter holidays and Martin Luther King Day, that we are proactive and go red, fully remote for that 2 week period of time. So not the whole segment 6, but those 2 weeks after the winter holidays, because we know both from surveys and from data that people have shared with us that that's when the most people are going to be traveling for the holidays, and thus when we have the most exposure to our school community is that 2 week period directly after the winter holidays. And the thought is, if we announce that soon, and I'm not saying that right now, so hear me well, this is for feedback from this group, but if we were to announce that soon, that might influence folks' travel plans at Thanksgiving, meaning they might feel differently about traveling at Thanksgiving if they know we're setting up the winter holidays to have a relief valve for travel by being remote for those 2 weeks after. And so if we do that, if we make that announcement soon, then we could re-ask our staff and students about segment 5, and that would look something like this. The survey or the question in Power School would be, are you planning to travel for Thanksgiving out of New England? If the answer is yes, then you must be remote for all of segment 5, meaning even though it's only a 2-week quarantine after travel outside of New England, it's only a 3+ week segment 5. And so we would say, if you're traveling out of New England for Thanksgiving, that whether you're a teacher or a student, you must be remote for segment 5. If you're not traveling out of New England for Thanksgiving, then we would ask what your segment selection would look like. And we would then be able to move forward, giving people and maintaining the choice that we've become accustomed to providing. As with all of our plan, a lot of it's relied on faith that the numbers are going to match, and we have no guarantee that that's the case. Once we say we'll be fully remote for 2 weeks in January, and now we're going to ask you to make your segment selection soon, meaning like next week, we're not guaranteed that the numbers of staff and students will align in such a way that we'll even be able to operate during segment 5. And it's possible that we may not have the staffing in December to operate if that's our requirement. And so if we're able to know that sooner than later, meaning next week, from our students and from our staff, we would then have a couple of weeks to be prepared to make whatever changes we need to make for segment 5, including if we have to reassign students amongst pods, if we have to reassign students into different classes, or whatever we might have to do to maintain the in-person and remote options for segment 5. Saying all that, I know that sounds like a lot of work to maintain the in-person option. And from my perspective and talking to the people that reach out to me, and there's a lot of you, which I really appreciate, the people feel very strongly about the in-person opportunity for kids. And when I say very strongly, I mean they are emboldened to advocate for keep our schools open. It's the right thing for kids. And frankly, our staff as well. I have many teachers that have reached out to me as well saying, please don't make me go remote. I need to see my kids. I need to be in person. I need to be there with them and continue to do that. Please don't make us go fully remote. And so the thought of the admin team is that what will naturally happen if we move in this direction is that the numbers for segment 5 will naturally be reduced, right? Because if people have to travel, if they have to be remote for segment 5, if they travel for Thanksgiving, then naturally the numbers for segment 5 will go down. How much, we won't know until we ask and find out for sure, but we know that will reduce and help things along. And then by being proactive for the first half of segment 6, by being fully remote, we think that as well will provide encouragement to our staff to remain in person if that's been their modality all along. What we're trying to avoid, very transparently, what we're trying to avoid is the idea of choice breaking down. We've given our faculty the ability to choose in person or remote, and for the most part, there are situations where we've had to push back on that request of our staff, but for the most part, we've been able to honor that all along, and that's worked for everybody because we've not had to get into the situations other school districts are in where they've really got to toe a hard line. They've got to be very strict about it, require doctor's notes, require folks to take leave or through ADA or FFCRA or what have you. And we don't want to get to that point because that's, in our opinion, that's opposite of what our really goal was in making people feel comfortable with their choice. So we think those two steps, if we can do that, will help us get through these next couple of segments. With that said, all of that said, conditions could change quickly. We know that. We still have almost no cases in our school right now. And then even in the towns of Amherst and Mount Vernon, both towns still have very low case counts. And that could change quickly, and we might need to go to a more restrictive status anyway. So our administrators would like to talk through what we think orange looks like and what an orange status would be, because we've worked on refining that from the last time we met. But before I do that, I just shared a lot about our kind of thought process, and I wanted to stop there before we do that and hear from the rest of the task force. So thoughts, questions, concerns?
Adam?
Yes, Autumn.
So something that came up when we were speaking with the parents, they mentioned, so we had gotten a survey a while back asking whether or not we planned on traveling. And this probably lends into what you spoke about, taking the two-step approach. But they said the surveys went out a little early, especially since case counts have started to change quite a bit, and that it might be worth sending that survey back out because I know even personally for me, our plans have changed. We are no longer traveling. Where I answered the survey, yes, but we're not traveling anymore. So there were a couple of people that said that they've changed their plans as well. So I know it might be not worth discussing if we're going to go ahead with the January closure anyway, but I just wanted to bring that up. And then there was also mention of bringing back the daily screening, especially during the winter months or when we might be considering going to orange and red, because it brings that idea of making sure you're checking for everything back to the forefront of parents' minds every morning before they send the kids to school.
Got it. So two things. I agree with you about the survey. That's why we would actually move up the timeline for the segment 5 selection to be next week as opposed to 2 weeks from now. So it wouldn't be a survey. It would actually be the segment selection form. It would be tied to individual parents and students, so we could make the plans based on the specific students and what their response was and staff. And then the daily screening form. So, and our nurses can speak to this, but we still are expecting parents to be doing that every day before you send your kid to school. We're just not requiring you to fill out a form every day because we found that parents were doing it. They were not sending sick kids to school for the most part, with very few exceptions. And it was taking half to 2/3 of the day for our nurses to track down those parents who didn't fill it out that morning. And we'd rather have our nurses dealing with kids and looking into potential issues as opposed to tracking down the form. So we didn't want to continue requiring a form that if we weren't going to double check it, make sure people were doing it, because then it becomes useless anyway. So that's a fair point. Other feedback from the group? Yes, Georgia.
Is there any way, I know we talked about this in the summer and it was not necessarily an easy thing to do, but is there any way we could get testing involved? Because that could, if we required a test after people went away, then maybe we wouldn't even have to have them do the 2-week quarantine.
Yeah, that's a very insightful question. So on the back end for the last couple of months, I've been working to see what can be done. If there's a way for us to, I've looked into buying a testing machine directly. I've looked into is that even possible? Could we do that locally? Our nurses wouldn't be able to administer that. They've got enough to do, kind of thing. But I've looked into that. The answer is no. You really can't privately buy a test machine. I don't know how the NFL does it, but we can't. And I'm not sure that we're able to require our students to get a test before they can enter the building. I'm not sure that, number one, they would have the ability to get a test if they needed one, and I'm not sure that we would be able to require that. But I, in my opinion, if this thing goes on for years into the future, if it may, then I think testing becomes the gateway to eventually that we're going to have to find a way to do it locally. So I agree with you there.
Well, one more thing on that. If we have students that didn't go away and they're coming back into the school, and then we do have students that did go away, could they then have the option to get a test, present a negative test, and be able to come to school? Or do the online option if they can't get a test, because then they're still getting an education. It's just they have to do the 2-week quarantine.
Well, actually, so interestingly, with quarantine, if you're in quarantine, you can't test out of it. Meaning, if you're required to quarantine, a test doesn't get you out of, like, because it can take up to 14 days for your exposure to result in you becoming ill. So that wouldn't solve that problem. I wish it was, or that wish it could, because that would be really nice if we could say, if you travel out of New England, come back, get a test, and you can come back. But according to the quarantine requirements, you still have to wait the full 14 days. But Deanna, you've got your hand up, and correct me if I'm wrong about my understanding of that.
No, you've studied your COVID facts very well. That's what I was going to say is even if you traveled out of state, it's a 14-day quarantine. You can't test out of quarantine because it's 2 to 14 days for the incubation period. So unless you were going to test every single day, a test is really only a snapshot in time of your being infected or not.
Thanks,
Adam,
Deanna.
can I ask you a question?
One second, Jolene. Stephen
Oh,
O'Keefe
sure.
had his hand up, and then you're
Oh,
next.
I'm sorry, Stephen.
No,
Sorry.
no problem. Yeah.
I'll be very brief. I just wanted to comment real fast that I actually like your plan. I think it's very transparent. I think it offers options, right? And so that's one of the great things about the way our SAU approached this entire issue is the fact that we're empowering our employees, we're empowering our parents, empowering our students to make a decision that's the most appropriate for them. I know the holidays this year are going to be completely different for everyone. Thanksgiving is not going to be a classic Thanksgiving in the O'Keefe household. And I'm sure it's going to be the same across the board. So whereas I have no desire to leave Mount Vernon this Thanksgiving, I can't say that's going to be the same for everyone. And so just empowering our community to make decisions that they feel are appropriate for them, it just goes a long way. I really like the approach. I think it's a really good idea.
Thank you, Stephen. Jolene, go ahead.
So Adam, for Orange, are you talking about reconstituting what Orange looks like? Is that, and will that be something that faculty has input in? Is that, I just want to make sure I understood how, or is this something that came from the administrators and we're here and it's going to be shared with them? I'm just trying to clarify how that's going to be, what the process is there.
Yes. So everything I just wrote out so far is separate from the Orange conversation. You know, I'm not stating what modality we would be in for segment 5 or 6. But yes, 2 weeks ago, I shared that I wanted the administrators to share with this group what we think Orange should look like, because we hadn't very well defined that over the summer. And so, yes, there would be a presentation today, opportunity for feedback and input amongst the faculty for sure, as we refine it and get better with it. So as always, yes, there's always a question of where's the right place to present something first. So if you haven't heard it yet about kind of our Orange thoughts, you will have a chance today, and then to provide feedback through the faculty, of course. Any other feedback on our thought process? All right, am I?
Sorry,
Yeah, Amy.
Amy,
Go
I
ahead,
just
Amy.
raised my hand. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that you weren't necessarily saying that we would be changing color code status, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
There's, in other words, we would, if we are able to ameliorate for travel in segment 5, meaning people who travel for Thanksgiving are automatically remote. And if we have a plan in segment 6 where we're all remote for the first 2 weeks, then we would still revert back to our local metrics and local case counts, positivity rates, et cetera, to make a status change, which as of right now,
I already got you for
would
life.
not
Trust
be
me.
warranted.
Do not disrespect me.
I meant that in a positive way.
Sorry about that. Does that make sense, Amy?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
So am I to take, I just want to make sure I'm hearing this subcommittee well. Are we hearing like perhaps this concept is valid? Is this a good approach? Are we on the right track here? Because from here, we're likely to make a final decision on that concept and then start the process of notifying our community, asking for the segment 5 selection, etc. So this is sort of a speak now or you may not get a chance to be heard. Jolene.
So just through the grapevine, I'm hearing that an orange plan was presented already. Can you speak to that? Did that happen somewhere? That an orange plan was presented?
Not here. Mike, are you?
I'll speak, Jolene. I have yet to present the plan to people at Sauhegan High School. If you recall, I gave up the faculty meeting for the faculty senate to have their meeting, and then we gave up the second faculty meeting for departments to have their meeting. We haven't had a venue to share it, and so we have it in very much a draft form, and I think it's pretty well thought out and still pretty fluid that we can have conversations. And so I know you're concerned about the process, and I know you're concerned about having teacher voice. We will find time for that, but in this year to find time for everything, we just haven't been able to. And we wanted to do this in person.
Okay, I'm hearing from other schools that it was presented. So I guess it wasn't Sauhegan, but as I'm on here, I'm hearing it. And so I just want to be representative of the people, of the faculty voice. It seems like there's some concerns about it, and I just want to make sure that the process is the right process, and that it, that it's clear to everybody what's the next steps are.
I appreciate that, Jolene. Yeah, we all very much value putting things out there, getting the feedback, refining and making it better. So for sure. Oh yeah, Sheelu, please.
Yeah, thanks. I think that this sounds like a plan that everyone can get around. I would just say in terms of the social emotional health of everyone, making a decision and saying this is what we're going to do is probably going to be the most helpful. People are feeling pretty out of control in terms of lots of different aspects of their life right now. And I think being able to have information and say, okay, I may like or not like this plan, but now I know what it is. And so I'd like to be able to make plans moving forward.
Got it. Thank you, Sheelu. All right, hearing all of that. So orange, this is a slightly different topic, but what orange may look like. So we as an admin team first had conversations about orange and thinking about a specific percentage of students to have in a building. And it was somewhat all over the place. There was questions of 25%, 40%, pick a number. And we went through what that would look like. And after really a lot of time coming up with what those plans would look like and finding ways to limit building capacity in some way, the only way to do that well is to have some sort of rotation of who's in person, either by day, meaning there's like a hybrid where people are in person one day, remote the next, and vice versa, or by week, or even by segment, where someone is remote for a whole segment and then they're in person for the next segment or something like that. And in working through those plans, we realized that we weren't really gaining anything from a safety perspective, meaning our orange plans weren't resulting in people that were much more spread out than normal, in some cases. We weren't achieving having less interactions between staff, students, or any mix of people. We were simply having less people inside a building at one time. And we know that results in less people on a bus and so forth. But in general, we weren't really accomplishing much in terms of providing a more safe environment, meaning there were still masks and hand hygiene and what we can do with social distancing and all of that. But we weren't making any incremental improvements to that by having any kind of hybrid, and a lot of disruption in the process. So what the administrators are presenting or want to present today is a look at what orange ought to be. And in short, it is a more restrictive status, a more restrictive yellow, a more taking what we're doing in the yellow status and making it more cautious and more safe. The most important part of which is a reduction in class size and a cap on class size in our schools, meaning would be right now where we are, if we're able to fit students at a 6 foot distance in a classroom, we're allowing that to happen, but still results in many people in one classroom. And we would instead have a cap on the number of people in each classroom. That would result in people having a lottery for who could be in person if there is a class that's over that limit. So that's probably the most difficult thing in what we're going to present, but nevertheless, we think that achieves where we need to go. And so I'd like to have the principals each spend a minute or two going through what their orange concept looks like for their building, for the purpose of gathering some feedback from this group. And to Jolene's point, if a staff or faculty hasn't had a chance to provide feedback yet, they certainly will. And these are not finalized. This is an attempt to start finalizing orange plans in the event we need them, because if we had to go to a more restrictive status tomorrow, we wouldn't be able to do it that quickly. We would need a week or so to be prepared to make that shift. And we'd like to not have that much lead time. And so by getting these plans in place, we can shorten that lead time between a decision to move to orange and when we could actually implement it. So Anna, if you wouldn't mind starting at Clark Wilkins and running through your draft of your orange plan.
All right. So can you hear me, Adam?
Yes.
Just to kind of echo some of the things that we've been doing in the past. So to kind of do a comparison, we feel that in our yellow that we really have provided a lot of structures and mitigated movement. And really what Adam said, this is like,
Oh, did Anna freeze up on us?
I think she did.
Anna, we've got to have you pay your Comcast bill. So Kim, why don't you jump in and we'll circle back to Anna once we get her reconnected.
Sure, I'll jump in. Can I share my screen?
Yep, I just shared her. Stop sharing hers. Go for it.
Okay. It's telling me that I'm looking at Anna's screen still. Nope.
Hang on one second here.
It's okay.
Okay, give it a try now if you would.
Okay, here we go. Awesome. Okay. So essentially, the first thing I just want to say is that all of our students are enjoying being here, and our staff is really excited to be here with the students as well. And it's been very clear to us that, especially like in our school, I don't know what's happening in the other schools, but I know that in our school, people want to be in the building. And so we've gone through many iterations of the orange plan. And this one that I'm about to present to you right now allows us to keep our kids and our teachers in school. And this is the plan that the teachers here at MVVS want, because they want their kids to be here. So what we did was, we know that our protocols are working because we've had a couple of scares, and no virus has spread in our building. Everybody has stayed safe. And so we want to make sure that we continue the practices that we have in place now, and we want to just boost them up a little bit more so that we can continue to keep everybody safe. So the first thing is that in our classrooms that have plexiglass, that have tables rather, they are about 5 feet apart, and we know that that's not adequate. So what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to have plexiglass partitions to separate the students who do share a table. We also want to make sure that for our single desks, they're all spaced 6 feet apart. And so we know that there is some furniture, I don't want to call it unnecessary, but I guess for the purposes of spacing the kids out 6 feet, we're going to need to eliminate any of that unnecessary furniture so that we can allow our desks to be adequately spaced. Also in K, I know that Anna was going to talk about this. In K, we're going to get rid of our rugs, and we're going to have students sit on their little circles, and they'll be spaced 6 feet apart when they're on the floor. They can still engage in many of the different activities that they engage in now and that they have been before. They'll just do it from their little circles, and they'll be adequately spaced. We did have to modify our schedule to allow for common specials. And the reason why we did that is because we know that there's one part of the day where we have students from different grade levels. I don't want to say mixing, but they're in the same room. And that is during our dismissal for parent pickup. Just because it's the one location that we have to have all of our students waiting for their names to be called when they're being picked up by parents. So right now, Mr. Blake is actually kind of in charge of our parent pickup operation, and he's really good about all of our kids are spaced out adequately. The kids are staying within their grade levels, but we want to make sure that we reduce the number of students who are in one room even more than we have them reduced right now. And so what we need to do is we need to offer common specials at the end of the day. And so there would be a 1 hour block of specials at the end of our day. And that would allow us to give parents the option of picking their students up early, 1 hour early. And so again, that would just reduce the number of students in our MPR at one time. So I guess I'll show what the schedule looks like. So what it would look like for us is we would still have our core content time. We would still have our ELA, our math, our social studies and science in grades K through 3. And then we still have our intervention time, our what I need block at the end of the day. And then again, we have specials for that last hour. For grades 4 through 6, which are departmentalized, we would just switch between humanities and STEM, just like we're doing now. Still allow a nice block of time for intervention and or acceleration, whatever students need. And then across the board, we would offer asynchronous specials so that our parents could have that option of picking their kids up early. When it comes to other safety measures in the school, what we would do is for some classrooms where we might not be able to space the desks exactly 6 feet apart, we have portable desks for every single student. So that's an option for teachers. If we can't figure out how to manipulate the furniture to allow for that spacing, we can use the portable desks, which would get us the space that we need. Also, with recess right now, kids are wearing their masks, but that would be something that would be required at all times for recess. So right now, if the kids are running around and they're not near the other students, they are allowed to take their masks off. That just wouldn't happen now. We would have them keep their masks on at all times. Also, right now we have grade level bands where our students can move in and out of their bands. Let's say if they need some remediation or they need some acceleration work during our WIN block, a K student could move up to first grade, or we could have a second grade student work with students and teachers in third grade. That is not going to happen in an orange status. We would allow for some movement within our WIN block, but only within one grade level. We would just have to get rid of our grade level bands. And then also with lunch, we've actually figured out a plan so that all grades can have lunch in their classrooms, except for grade K. Grade K still has to have lunch in the MPR because we don't have enough staff members to cover both of our K classrooms. However, for all of our other grades 1 through 6, lunch is being delivered to the classrooms, and it will continue to be delivered to the classrooms. And then unfortunately, I'll just say that the impact in terms of the teaching staff, the concession is that right now they have a longer lunch block, and so that lunch block would have to be reduced, and we kind of just have to follow the terms of their contract, which is a 30-minute lunch block and then a 40-minute prep period to allow for them to be present in classrooms during that asynchronous specials time at the end of the day. We're going to need our paraprofessionals to assist with that early dismissal. And then we also have students who receive special ed services who do have a one-on-one assigned to them, so we can't disrupt that when it comes to that specials time. And so that's pretty much it. I just have the logistics of our of what the coverage looks like, but that's pretty much it.
Got it. Thank you, Kim. Anna is back. So Anna, if you would like to take it back off again, I'll share my screen of the presentation if you want.
I just want to say I felt good about my first presentation. That was awesome. So again, we feel good about the things that we've had in place. And so like Adam said, this is really a beefed up orange, yellow on steroids. So what I did to present was compare our yellow right now compared to our orange. So what we would do is right now masks are not worn during recess. So that's one of the areas that we think that definitely we could tighten up during orange. Preschool currently does not wear a mask at all, so they would be required to wear a mask. Students right now are in a 2 or a 3 person pod. They move all day only in their pod, recess and everything. So those 2 or 3 person pods, they actually, what we would do is we would say, once you come into the classroom, there's no movement. There would not be movement even within the pod. 4th grade is a STEM and humanities. We would still keep that, and we would actually move the teachers instead of the students. Right now, our workspaces are 3 to 6 feet. We took a look at all of the classrooms, and with the removal of some more furniture, with removal of the rug space as an instructional space, so the students wouldn't be coming on and off of the rug because we couldn't ensure the 6 feet. We would be able to do that. 1st grade and kindergarten, we have tables. We would look to do plexiglass in between the tables so we could offer more distancing. The 4th grade is one of our pods. They're in the portables. And so we couldn't assure the 6 feet there. So we reached out to be able to try to do the plexiglass on the individual desk in 4th grade in that classroom. And then I think that's it there, Adam, to the next slide. So for further considerations, right now, all of our class sizes are 12 to 16. That would be our cap at 16. Currently, that is in grade 2 and grade 4. We would look to it with the nurses, assistants. We would look to improve education for students. So for the indoor recesses and for indoor lunches, just that educational piece, just reminding them what lunch and indoor recess would look like. Keeping all materials now individual, reinforcing that. Currently our pod model, students move within the pod for different services and intervention. Those interventions would be in the classroom, and special education would be just like related services. There would be a pull-out model so that we're not intermixing students. We would have more scheduled mask breaks throughout the day, especially with recess, not being able to have the mask break. And again, we talked about preschool. It's really having the mask and the physical distancing in that space. With that, we did collect feedback on this. And so if you guys have any questions.
Oh, thanks, Anna. I think we'll go through the other 2 schools and then circle back for questions. So Bethany, would you like to do AMS?
Sure. All right. So just want to reiterate again, as we're going through this, that this is our draft plan. It's not finalized by any means, and feedback is really important. So working to the wire, we've had a chance to prevent and get some initial reactions from teacher leadership and share out with our faculty today. And are really encouraging faculty to provide feedback to teacher leadership to circle back and make our plan better and hear how we can really meet everyone's needs with this. So the kind of guiding principles that we're really focused on here is increasing our capacity for social distancing in our school. All of our classrooms are currently set up with 6 feet spacing between students. in the classrooms, but really trying to make that a little bit more, so to just really increase that capacity. Reducing unstructured time. So we took a look at some of the weak points in our yellow plan that are okay based on our recommendations from our medical staff for our current status, but really tightening those up and reducing the number of students on campus. So a few of the key features were modifying the schedule to reduce unstructured time and providing staggered dismissal options. The middle of the day, our smart lunch and our dismissal are the two places where more students are coming into contact with one another. So really trying to tighten those pieces up. Morning arrival has been working well at staggering students through a staggered drop off and really keeping students separate through the morning. We'd be looking at our mask and movement breaks and scheduling these more to really space out classes and space out students and to reduce mixing even further. We're working with our cafeteria staff, so they've said that we would be able to deliver lunch to classrooms, so avoiding students coming down. Currently, they pick up all their prepackaged meals down at the CAF, but we could reduce that travel and the intermixing by delivering lunches. A staggered dismissal with our buses. So instead of dismissing all the buses at once, really dismissing a few buses and putting in a little bit of lag time between, just so that we can spread students out as they leave. And then, as Adam mentioned, capping our class sizes at 14 to 15 students per class. So modifying the schedule, again, we would keep with our remote schedule as is, so that would stay in place for our remote learners. Our in-person schedule, as I mentioned, would adjust in a couple of places to reduce that unstructured time. So the morning looks the same, but you can see that that smart lunch in the middle of the day is typically from 11 to 12:30. And in orange, the proposal would be to have a half-hour lunch right there to reduce some of that unstructured time. We would not be putting in a recess and that unstructured time, but in speaking with some of our teacher leaders, would be looking for ways to create movement breaks, as teachers are doing a really great job of already doing throughout those cores. Then at the directed study piece, which normally abuts the lunch period, is then moved to the end of the day. What this allows us to do is to do a staggered dismissal. So if students are parent pickup, a parent could elect to pick up their child at 1:40 or 2:24, and that would reduce our numbers going outside at that point and stagger that dismissal. Students who were staying on campus would do their directed study activities. Students who are being dismissed could do those directed study activities on their own at home. And we also use that directed study time as time for some additional services. So if students were getting support during there, they'd stay for that later dismissal. Finally, going back to class size and staffing needs. So what this would do would essentially cap our class sizes at 15. We have sufficient space in each of our classes to have 15 students, and that gives more than 6-foot spacing in each of our classrooms. We've really done a very close audit of all of our classrooms over the course of this year to know exactly how many students can fit in there and what the spacing would be appropriate. An important consideration in doing this as well is to make sure that our remote class size numbers don't go to a point where we know it's educationally not sound. So we've tried to keep those within the recommendations the school board had adopted in the past couple of years for class sizes. So balancing those needs. What this does mean is that we would need to do a lottery for students attending school. You can see that our 7th grade is our particular place where we have really a large 7th grade. And so we'd need to have significantly more students go remote in that grade level. 5th and 6th are pretty stable. 8th, 7th, and 8th grade would be the places we'd need more students to be remote. I think that's it.
Thank you, Bethany. And Mike Berry.
Mike, you're on mute.
Yeah, go ahead and start over, Mike. Thanks.
for real this time. Like I said, Adam, I appreciate the opportunity to present the draft plan. However, when we think about the draft plan at Sauhegan and what we're doing, we wanted to make it as consistent as possible for students and families and teachers. And so we have a lot of the same features as yellow. And so you'll look through our plan, it's not going to be that drastically different. One of the things that, unfortunately what's happening is we have many teachers teaching in dual modalities already. So a lot of our classes are synchronized, whether you're in person and you're remote. The interesting thing about Sauhegan High School right now is, we currently have roughly around 522 kids who have chosen to be in-person learners, and we have 187 students that have chosen to be remote learners. And we have staff that has chosen to be in-person remote learners. So what we tried to do is come up with a plan to allow that choice to be there, but also kind of tighten up on the, when you're in person, what does that look like? And so having less people to manage in the building and use the small classrooms as efficiently as possible was something that we took a look at. So one of the big significant changes would be we would run Monday and Tuesday for in-person students. You would be A through L, for example. Not settled on this, but for this conversation, A through L. The rest of the class, the rest of the students would be in a synchronized remote learning environment with those teachers. And Thursday and Friday, we would flip it. Our Wednesdays would be, at this point, a remote white scheduled day, periods 1 through 8. And that is the one time during the week that all students are in class together. And we thought that was pretty important at the high school level to at least have one meeting time a week where the classes were all together. Now, of course, that we are going to allow Wednesdays and encourage Wednesdays to have remote students who need to have in-person contact with their teachers to come in. Some of the other populations of students that we want to have to come in so they can get additional supports, we would take a look at that as well. We definitely like to use Wednesdays as a day to have the students who don't feel comfortable accessing the building to be able to access, have teachers who want to work differently with students to be in on that day. But we also are, kind of at the same time we're talking about this, is to make sure that Wednesday is more effective and efficient for as many students as possible. And that's why we think attaching a schedule to it and changing the mindset around, being a school day. So that came up in the orange conversation as well. You see the difference. One of the things that will be pretty substantially different is like where students eat lunch. And right now students are eating lunch and it's a pretty student friendly, kind of situation, but this would be a little more strict. The routines in the building would be a little more strict, but we would have the desks and the working stations kind of spread out a little bit more throughout the building. There's a copy of the schedule as of today, what it would look like. And a couple things that, we talked about, like what groups access the building and how on Wednesdays, and talk a little bit about how advisory works. Those are still some things that are unanswered. As mentioned earlier, we will be, consulting with more people in the building to learn how, if we had to go orange, what would be the most effective plan and the way to educate the students at the high school. So that is the orange plan right now. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, principals. So, so feedback from this group. What I'm looking for specifically is on the specifics are things we would work out at the building level with our faculty and staff. But what I'm looking for from this group is, are we thinking about orange in the right way? Meaning, the alternative that most of the school districts around us are doing is some sort of alternating schedule for students at every grade level. Is our concept of a more restrictive status with removing carpets from the elementary so that kids can be more spread out, having class sizes capped, having more restrictions on movement in the building, all of that. Are we on the right track with our thought process for what orange ought to look like? That's my question for this group. Georgia.
So I just want to clarify before I say what I had to say. Are we talking about for the holidays, if we chose to go orange, this is what it would look like, or if we needed to go because of cases into it orange.
Yeah, if we needed to go orange next week,
Oh
George,
no, it's cutting
or
out.
sorry, can you hear me now? Okay, so if we needed to go
Yeah.
orange next week, Georgia, or February 1st, or at any time in the future, if we had to go orange, this is what our orange plans would look like. So not for the holidays, because again, we think that by having people tell us what they're doing over Thanksgiving and making folks go remote who travel at Thanksgiving and being closed for 2 weeks in January, that we don't have as much of a need to proactively go to a red status, for example, during either of those segments. So separately, we're trying to prepare for if orange is necessary as cases are ramping up in our country.
Gotcha. Well, in that case, I think that the high school plan obviously is more prevalent to me, but I think that was a great plan. For that case, I mean, for now, I think that we're doing a really great job, and it's feeling as close to normal as we can possibly make it while also feeling super safe. And I think that if we had to make that progression, would be really great. And then I also liked all of the elementary school ones, especially like the keeping the masks on recess. That's kind of an easier way to like get the kids to realize that it's getting a little bit worse, but that they can still do what they need to do. So I think they're all really well done.
Dr. LaBranche. Let me try to unmute you here. There you go.
I think the concept is headed in the absolute right direction. I think the whole notion of trying to keep in-person instruction through orange, wherever that is possible, is a better alternative than looking at some of the other ones that you mentioned that other school districts are attempting to use at this point in time. So I think as an orange plan and mode of action, I think conceptually this makes logistical, practical, and educational sense from my perspective.
Thank you, Dr. LaBranche. Anyone else? Or Stephen?
I actually agree with Dr. LaBranche. I do like the approach. I think it's actually definitely well thought out. We just need to be very hyper aware of how we're going to restrict student population and what that approach is going to be in the communication we're going to be making to parents and families about their child not being a part of the in-person experience. We just need to really think that through.
Meaning because of the artificial caps on class size.
Yeah, so I didn't hear that in Mount Vernon, but I definitely heard it in the middle school in Amherst and at the high school. So if we're going to be capping class sizes, we're going to have to come up with a pretty robust, well-communicated mechanism to exclude a portion of those kids.
Indeed. Yeah, that will be the most unpopular part by far. We think it's what is necessary to have that next layer of safety in place, but we agree that will be widely unpopular for those who are missing the chance to be in person against their will.
And just as additional feedback, not to occupy too much time, is to maybe offer some context of why we're moving to orange, and then solicit volunteers, families that now no longer are comfortable based on your decision-making process, to exclude them voluntarily from the classroom.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely. Autumn, and then Jolene.
So I'm wondering if we were to go remote, would we still keep the same layout of segments? Because if our children have to go into a lottery, but the lottery, or we only stay in orange for 4 or 5 weeks, then those kids that went into the lottery and then were bumped out of the class miss an entire segment. So it would be interesting to maybe explore the idea of shortening segments if we are into the orange status, so that there's a likely chance that the kids would be able to transition more frequently and get in-person learning experience for equal amounts of time, rather than the chance of maybe one group of students being out longer than others, based on how things might change being in the orange status. And to piggyback on Steve, I know Mount Vernon is the anomaly here because we have small class sizes, but I would like to know if we will be putting caps on classes there. And you may not have that information tonight, Kim or Adam, but that would be a good bit of information for parents in Mount Vernon to know so we can be prepared for a possible lottery situation.
Thanks. Jolene.
Hi, thank you. I'm just wondering, and I'm sorry I missed a little bit of this because of parent conference, but I'm wondering a couple things. For the orange, if we go orange, the teachers will have time to get prepared for all of this. Because I just worry about the teachers. Like, I'm hearing from a lot of people who are really overwhelmed right now, and I just want to mention that because my Slack has been flooded like as we're on live. So I just feel like I just want to say that teachers are really feeling stressed, and so I just want to make sure that we get feedback from all the stakeholders and that they have plenty of time to prepare. And I'm sorry if you already said that would happen. And then the other thing that I would just caution about is if we have this like breakdown, the A through L, K through Z, I know sometimes that doesn't actually make classrooms smaller. So I would just want to make sure that that wasn't the actual lens. Like, I know if on one of mine, I would still have I would still have almost all of my kids in one class. And then the last thing I would want to say is will people still have choice in orange? Or is that mean back at, like, teachers are expected to be back in, or are we maintaining choice?
There's a lot there, Jolene. So no, but you're right. First, there would be time for a transition from, like, for example, if cases changed dramatically and we had to do something with orange right away, we wouldn't be able to do it this week. There would have to be some time and preparation put in place. And so something I think you did miss was that I mentioned we're trying to get these plans solidified so that if we have to go to an orange status, we can do it without needing a week of lead time where we don't have school. That, we want to shorten that time, that window. And then I'm forgetting your other, teachers being overwhelmed. So that's a consistent theme. Hearing that from the staff group for sure. Stephen and Amy shared that with me privately as well, that they heard that as a strong theme in their meeting with the Staff and Association Subcommittee. I've heard that from the medical and science group. I'm hearing that from Sheelu and the social work side of things. I'm hearing it everywhere, frankly. And even the comments and questions today have been mostly teachers with concerns about all of that. So, and so I think what would be prudent, I'm kind of thinking on my feet here a little bit, but I'm thinking that it would be appropriate for the faculty and association subcommittee to have a chance to meet and to provide additional feedback, having heard everything today, because Jolene, you're hearing a lot of feedback. I'm starting to see, and I'm not reading it all while I'm in this meeting, but I'm seeing my queues start to build. And so there's need for additional feedback, and we need to acknowledge that this is a shift in what we thought orange would be over the summer, or I'm trying to acknowledge that we think this is a better way to address what a more restrictive status would look like. But that change creates uncertainty, and then uncertainty creates stress, and we don't want to create even more stress in an already stressful time. So I get that. So I'm thinking we ought to provide that opportunity for that subcommittee to meet again, where myself and maybe the principals are present, and to gather that feedback collectively and use it again in preparation for if we ever need to use the orange status. So maybe that's kind of my feedback to you, Jolene. And with that, what choice still looks like in orange, because I hope it comes across. I'm still very much committed to the idea of people feeling comfortable coming to school or not coming to school. Where I get boxed in a little bit in my very unique position as superintendent is I have expectations from our board and community for the type of school I need to provide. And as long as the numbers work, I'm able to continue to support and defend in some ways that need for people to make a choice to come, whether they feel when they feel comfortable. I don't want our plans to back me into a place where I'm no longer able to do that. And so I hope I'm expressing how hard I am trying to maintain that concept of choice for people. I'm trying really hard. It's really important to me. I can't promise it indefinitely. I can't, because if the numbers shift in such a way that I can't operate the school in the way that I think is safe and appropriate given the conditions in our community, I'm going to have to make changes to our to how we do that. But for right now, I'm fighting very hard for that. Our principals had orange plans that would have eroded that in some ways, because that's the orange plan from the summer. We went back and retooled it, and this is what the retooled plans look like. So we're trying really hard to maintain that, Jolene, but just being very transparent, it's not easy. It's not easy to keep that commitment to that in place without a lot of faith and trying to have these conversations as we keep going.
Okay, thanks, Adam.
Thank you. We only have another 4 or 5 minutes. So as expected, we didn't get to our other 2 questions. So I'm just wondering, I mentioned that perhaps the admin in the faculty and staff subgroup need to have a meeting or additional opportunities for feedback from our faculty. Is there a need for another meeting of this task force in another couple of weeks? And what I'm asking specifically is, this committee was brought forward and commissioned to look at the holidays. We presented our concept for the holidays, and so there would not be another need to meet to discuss that in a couple of weeks if this task force is all set with that. I do think there might be a need for us to meet again a little bit down the road as we look to the spring, as we look to next summer, all of that. But if what I'm hearing is most people are starting to shift to, it's time to think about the holidays and get through the holidays and get through all of that. And I'm just wondering if this committee is done for now until the new year when we start looking at those other 2 questions. So I don't know, show of hands, do we meet again? Or are we all set for now?
I would concur, Adam, that we're all set for now.
Okay, thank you.
Agreed.
Katie Kennedy looks like she really wants to meet a couple more times. Oh, is that not what the thumbs up meant? Katie, I'm sorry. Okay.
No, I think the time is more wisely spent with getting the feedback from obviously your faculty, your staff members, with the leadership group to put, if you will, more detail on the orange plan moving forward. I think that's the priority right now.
All right, well, that's what we will do then. And just one piece of Deanna, go ahead.
Question I had was, or the concern, you're talking to go 2 weeks remote at the beginning of January. So then we come back after Martin Luther King Day, that Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
Is it wise to change the sessions so it's the next session starts then, rather than to have to change again in 2 weeks, or to follow through with the remote for that whole session?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can look at that. The rest of our segments for the year, and I'm thinking of Autumn's comments as well about shortening, especially if we have to go orange, so there's not a 4-week kind of lottery system. The rest of our segments line up pretty well with our school vacations as it is. And so if we make that next segment 4 weeks long, it would offset us a little bit, but we can look at that for sure as we get closer. And good point, Deanna. All right, hearing nothing else for now, I will end us for today, and we'll work with principals to schedule that opportunity to meet with our faculty and associations. I think it might be helpful. I'll probably ask Stephen and Amy if they'd attend as well, just to have that school board perspective in the conversation, if they're comfortable.
Sure.
I think that'd be helpful to kind of have everybody together for that. So we'll work on that. Thank you for these 2 meetings. Very helpful from my perspective, gave me a lot of feedback and information, and we will keep moving forward, folks. Thank you. Thank you all so much for your time. Take care.
Thank you.